This beautiful woman had just lost her husband. While she was on her knees crying at the grave, a strange man proposed to her.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Clark Davis. I have a proposition for you. I know it's not the right place or the right time, but I figure if we marry, it'll help solve both our problems.
It turns out that David lost his wife a few years ago. He felt that his daughter Lucy needed a mother and a mother's love. And in return, he could provide a woman with a sheltered place to live. Marty was hesitant to listen. Just a few days before, she had come west from the big city with her husband to explore the wilderness. After a long journey, they finally found a fertile land. But just as the couple was looking forward to a better life, an accident struck. Her husband was chasing a runaway horse when he accidentally fell off his horse and died. The unfamiliar Mattie was left with no one to turn to. She curled up in the carriage, helpless and grief-stricken. But just then she found out she was pregnant. A pregnant woman can't even hope to live in the harsh West. And winter is coming. And the caravan to the big city would not come until next spring. How could she survive this long winter? David saw her plight right away. He said that if Mattie wanted to leave here next spring, he was willing to pay for her return home. For the sake of the baby in her belly, Mattie had no choice. But when she saw David's daughter fighting with boys like a boy, she flinched a little. She couldn't imagine herself living with a strange man and a tough little girl. That's when the neighbor's wife tells Mattie,
"There is no place in this part of the country to waste your time crying over wants. Your life's about needs now. You need a roof over your head for the winter. That's what you bargained for."
And that's how Marty and David finished their wedding. And behind them, Lucy is hostile to the new mother. But luckily David was a decent guy. He gave up his room to Mattie. Instead, he moved into the barn. The first night at David's house, Mattie spent in grief. The next morning she was sarcastic by Lucy for getting up late. Luckily, David helps her out. After father and daughter leave, Mattie cried out on the swing. She let out her grief over the loss of her husband and the helplessness of being alone. She cried all day long. The good thing is that David understands her. He believed she would soon get over her grief. On the third day, Mattie's emotions calmed down a lot. She approached David and asked, "I don't understand what you want me to do." David told her straight out.
She's 9 years old. She works almost as hard as I do, sun up to sundown. She never complains, but the work is stealing her childhood. She doesn't know what she's missing, but I do. Maybe if somebody's there to share the chores, she'd have time to learn some of the things I think you could teach her. She'd learn from her mother.
The teaching problem is easy for Marty to do, but farm work is torture for a wife from the big city. This woman from the city doesn't know how to get eggs from the henhouse. She didn't know how to warm her hands before milking the cows. She doesn't even know how to make a fire. She often burns her hands while cooking, but that's not the worst of it. Lucy, who had always disliked her, found an opportunity to make fun of her.
How'd you get to be so old without not knowing how to do nothing?
She even teased Marty with a turd on purpose. Mattie finally had a big fight with Lucy and couldn't stand it anymore. But she had to be strong in order to live. Tension at the dinner table at night.
So how was your day?
Fine.
You're fine.
And so the war between the two women began. David had to pretend he didn't see it. He said his friend had invited the family to a party. Lucy immediately seized the opportunity to taunt Marty for being afraid to meet strangers. The angry Mattie immediately agreed. She also gave the little girl a provocative glare. As a result, Lucy secretly attracted a skunk the next day. The unsuspecting Mattie was sprayed all over her face. To eliminate the smell, Lucy gave Marty a tomato bath. But it didn't really work. David smelled Marty's pungent odor as soon as he arrived home. Mattie knew the little girl was playing a trick on her, but she had no proof. Then Lucy taunted her about how she could only make burnt pancakes and couldn't even make fried chicken. Now Mattie's desire to win was completely aroused. First she looked up the recipe in a book. Then she took the axe and went into the chicken coop. But she did not know that the chicken should be caught until dark. She ended up with a lot of chickens. She finally caught the fried chicken. Marty finally made the fried chicken after a lot of hard work. But the chicken coop looked like it had been attacked by wolves. David and Lucy both saw it and did not say it. But after this incident, Lucy was touched by her kindness. At night she talked to Marty for the first time about her mother. That day Mattie unexpectedly saw Lucy pull out her mother's dress and cry.
I don't know why they didn't let me come here, Mama. I just wanted to tell you that I miss you.
It turns out that this strong little girl is so fragile on the inside. Outside the door, Marty was deeply touched by her sadness. She also unconsciously choked up. Lucy, whose little secret had been discovered, angrily accused her of peeking and made no secret of her dislike for her.
I hated that you're here. Bible birthday cake. I wish it was spring so you'd leave.
Mattie knew that her actions had broken Lucy's heart, so she decided to leave the place. But the uncharismatic David encouraged her.
It's going just the way I thought it would. I knew she wouldn't like it at first.
Then why put her through this?
And I'm counting on the fact that knowing you is going to add to the person that Missy will become. I know you can find a way to get through to her.
How do you know?
That's what I prayed for.
Marty looked at the red dress on the bed and she seemed to understand something. She cut Lucy's dress to size all night long. In the morning, Lucy smiled for the first time when she saw the red dress Mattie had made for her. Wearing the red dress, she hugged her father tightly with joy. Marty also smiled with relief. Lucy became the center of attention at the party. The boys were all dumbfounded. Lucy walked proudly through the crowd. She was no longer a motherless child. He's the kind of guy you only see in textbooks. The wife tells her husband she's pregnant with her ex-husband's child. But this was his response.
Actually, I was thinking I'm glad you're going to have a little one to remember it by.
David's generosity made Marty begin to accept this man. One day when David went to pray, Marty was curious and followed him. Listening to David immersed in his own song, Marty couldn't help but laugh out loud. But she soon realized that David was singing to his wife in heaven. Not wanting to disturb them, Mattie turned to leave. At that moment, she saw the horse her ex-husband had been chasing and couldn't help but be touched by the scene. And suddenly the sky was filled with snow. The long winter had come. When David returned home, it was already white outside. It was hard to see anything. At that moment Lucy said that Mattie had not returned after you went out. David realized the seriousness of the problem. He rushed out to look and kept calling Mattie's name. I don't know how long it took. He finally found the woman kneeling in front of the horse. By now the snowstorm was getting bigger and bigger. There was no way to tell where he was going because of the snow. Lucy, who was waiting at home, was also very anxious, seeing the time passed by minute by minute. Fortunately, she had an idea. She grabbed a spatula and a pan and banged on the door. The disoriented David finally heard her. At night David sat by Mattie's bed for the first time. She was still unconscious and having nightmares. Lucy, who was sleeping on the other side of the bed, became worried.
But what about the baby?
Baby's fine. Okay, go on, get some rest.
Outside the house, the snowstorm was still falling. But this little room was so cozy. After Lucinda accepted the new mother in her heart, their relationship became very good. Mattie taught Lucy to read and write, and Lucy taught Mattie to do farm work. Time flew by. A few months passed by. It was finally time for Mattie to give birth. Lucy waited quietly outside the room. Only when she heard the baby's cries did a smile spread across her lips. The winter snow melted and everything came back to life. Spring came quietly, and it was time for Marty to leave. But these few months together she has completely adapted to the life here. She also accepted David and his daughter from the bottom of her heart. But when David first expressed his love to her, she panicked and ran away. She didn't know what was in her heart. The contracted marriage had also left her in a state of confusion. The day the neighbor's wife came to visit Mattie, she saw her anxiety, so she told Marty about her view of love.
You know, sometimes love isn't fireworks. Sometimes love just comes softly.
The neighbor's wife's words reminded Marty of her first encounter with David. She was happy with the father and daughter. She confirmed the love that was spreading, so she wrote the letter that asked David to keep her. Then she put the letter in David's clothes. Then she asked Lucy to give the clothes to David. But when Mattie told David she was leaving, David acted indifferent. She thought this man didn't like her at all, so she got on the carriage to the big city with heartache. And after seeing Mattie off, David returned home and couldn't stop crying. He asked God why he sent Mattie here and then took her away. Fortunately, God does not disappoint every devout believer. While David was on his knees praying to God, he overheard the letter on the ground. It turned out that Lucy had dropped the letter when she was getting her clothes. Fortunately, it was not too late. Seeing the letter, David did not hesitate to get on his horse and chase after him. Then he said the words that Marty had been waiting for.
Don't leave. Stay with us.
But I have to stay for the right reasons.
Stay because I love you.
Maybe I should stay because I love you.